Stephen Callahan named his homemade sloop Napoleon Solo, inspired by the clever American agent from the man from UNC Lee, and in January of 1982, he embarked on a solo voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. But things took a dramatic turn when a nocturnal storm pummeled his boat, causing a giant hole that flooded it with water. Callahan had to gather what little supplies he could before climbing into a life raft. Miraculously, it took 76 days for someone to come to his rescue after he was stranded in the middle of the Atlantic. Before we dive in, please subscribe to the Reality Threads channel and leave us some thoughtful comments. A whale struck Callahan's sloop, disrupting his solo Atlantic voyage. With little time to gather supplies as the sloop sank rapidly, he scrambled to inflate his life raft. Imagine trying to load up your family station wagon for a long road trip while your house is on fire. Callahan dove into the submerged vessel to grab essentials like a water purifier, fishing line, and a spear rifle, all while his vision was impaired, forcing him to rely on memory to find everything under the water. He managed to salvage 8 ounces of water, baked beans, eggs, corned beef, cabbage, peanuts, and raisins for sustenance. But even with strict rationing, he would run out of food in about 2.5 weeks. To survive, Callahan turned to traditional navigational methods. He crafted a sextant to measure the distance between the horizon and celestial bodies like stars and planets, helping him gauge his position and determine the best direction to head. With the North Star guiding him toward the West Indies, Callahan set sail. The journey took much longer than anticipated, but he eventually reached land. Taking the scenic, traditional path paid off in the end. For the sake of his sanity and survival, Callahan split his mind into 2 personas, the captain and the crewman. While I sometimes struggle to determine whether my new sweater makes me look overweight, spoiler, it doesn't. Callahan's method made sense. The captain made the tough decisions, issuing orders the crewmen had to follow. But there were times when they disagreed, like the heated argument over the water supply, which is documented in Callahan's notebooks. His raft began to form its own ecosystem after being at sea for so long. A barnacle colony had developed on the ocean floor, attracting schools of Dorado fish. With these fish constantly around, Callahan started to think of them as pets, even learning to recognize certain individuals. It would have been awkward to catch and eat them if he'd named them, so let's hope he didn't. Meanwhile, sharks were drawn to the fish and relentlessly circled Callahan's raft, a constant reminder that he wasn't alone in his struggle for survival. Though Callahan had retrieved a purifier from his sinking boat, it was useless for turning salt water into drinkable water. He had to figure out a new way to stay hydrated. His rainwater collection system, using balloons and tarps, only produced about 20 ounces of potable water a day, roughly the amount in a single Dasani bottle. But that small amount was enough to sustain him for 76 days. If you thought one of those sharks might have attacked Callahan's raft, you'd be wrong. However, a smaller Dorado fish came dangerously close to sinking him. When he went fishing, the fish tore a hole in the bottom of his raft. Every time he tried to repair it and inflate the raft again, the rip would pop open. The raft stayed on the brink of destruction, but Callahan kept patching it up as best he could. The raft was finally repaired after Callahan endured perilous weather for a week, working frantically with his arms underwater while a ring of sharks closed in on him. Callahan faced a different fate than the cargo tanker that raced past Tom Hanks's character in Castaway, saving him. 7 ships, including 2 that were less than a mile away, passed within his sight during the 76-day struggle. Despite his efforts, using a flare rifle and emergency radio beacon to signal them, no one responded. It wasn't until he was rescued by friendly fishermen off the coast of Marie-Galante, a Caribbean island, that Callahan was saved. Thanks to the fishing line he had salvaged, he managed to avoid famine, though he suffered from severe malnutrition throughout his ordeal. By the time he was rescued, he had dropped 40 pounds, 1/3 of his body weight. The worst part wasn't the hunger, though. It was the constant exposure to the sun and seawater that caused his skin to slide off his body, leaving him covered in painful, open sores. In a solemn moment, we promised never to complain about anything again, unless, of course, our skin was sliding off. This harrowing experience led director Ang Lee to seek Callahan out as an advisor for his film Life of Pi. A boy and an adult tiger find themselves stranded on a raft in the movie. Though Callahan found the film too realistic to watch, we can't help but wonder if he mentioned to the filmmakers that a 300-pound tiger on a raft might have altered his survival strategies. Based on his traumatic experience, Callahan went on to build a stronger life raft, which he named the Clam. This new raft, designed for practicality, featured a canopy to shield from the sun, a system to collect rainwater, and a fiberglass bottom to withstand the inevitable rips caused by fish. Callahan chronicled his 76-day ordeal in a memoir titled Adrift, 76 Days Lost at Sea, published in 1986. The riveting account of his survival struggle not only kept readers hooked, but also managed to stay on the New York Times bestseller list for several weeks, despite fierce competition from the Top Gun novelization. His memoir was later adapted for the documentary series I Shouldn't Be Alive, which centers around survival stories. The episode, titled 76 Days Adrift, aired on November 17, 2010, nearly 29 years after his rescue. Every obstacle seemed stacked against Stephen Callahan during his solo ocean voyage. He had little food, water, or reliable navigational tools, yet he survived for 11 weeks thanks to his ingenuity and determination. Is Stephen's incredible story something you can relate to? What would you do if stranded at sea for 76 days? Share your thoughts in the comments.